Welcome back in, everybody, to another edition of the Dynasty Trade Show. We're so glad that you could join us. And this is going to be a first, man. You're seeing it here, the first ever three-way. Three-way on the Dynasty Trade Show. We are joined by an incredible guest, one of our good friends in the space, a very, very smart, very, very good Dynasty player, Scott Connor. You know him from DLF, the Dynasty Trade Show. DLF, Destination Dynasty on Destination Devi, which is an incredible show, which we were just talking about, that I still have to finish it for this week. And he's also doing Dynasty Trades in 5. Gee, Scott, what don't you do, buddy? Thank you so much for popping in, but hey, tell the people where they can find you, first off.
Yeah, I mean, glad to be here. First time guest on the trade show. Should be fun. You named most of it, man. The only other thing I would say is Twitter, at Charles Chill FFB. Everyone always wonders, how the hell did you get Charles Chill in your name when my name's not Charles? It's actually Scott. But that, and then you mentioned everything else. Dynasty Trades in 5 is really the only other thing that I like to plug, just because it's a different platform. It's YouTube. It's going to be similar. If you like Dynasty Trades in 5, you're probably going to want to listen to this. So make sure that we're, crossing each other with that, because it's a lot of the same audience just loves. We get so many comments that's just like, dude, trade after trade after trade after trade. That's all I want, because it gives me ideas on what to do in my own league. So it's a good fit. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to have you on here. And to your point, man, Dynasty Trades in 5 is basically like the premier big-time version of what we're doing over here with the Trade Show, right? Well, we're trying to aspire to be that. But to have Scott on, everybody that's tapped in, this is exciting to have one of the guys, a Destination Devi member, but also one of the smartest Dynasty minds in the game. So let's hop right into it, man. Let's get into some of the trades. As always, Scott, we start off with one of our own. This one's going to be mine here. Let's go ahead and get into this one. So this is the Fade the Fetal League here, Scott and Mike. This is a BDGE league. Nick Ercolano's actually in this. If you listen to our podcast way back in the day, he's down into only 2 Dynasty leagues. So this is in his league. This team here is one of these, Scott, where I built the league, my team in this league, more like what I should have probably done, not necessarily in the depth of the best ball, but it was built on running backs. And it's to the point now where like I need to reassemble things, and I'm down my 23 first. I'm competitive enough. Like last week, my team went off. I just don't feel confident enough week in and week out that that's going to be the thing, right? So Alvin Kamara for me off of a pop week was someone. Like I wasn't actively shopping, but if someone was willing to pay up, I was willing to do that. So here, this is a 12-team start 10. It's tiered PPR, and it's 0.2 points per carry. So I'm receiving Darren Waller, a 24 first, a 24 third, and Schumer. Shout out to Schumer. He's also a shithead. He is receiving Alvin Kamara, Paris Campbell, and Devin Duvernay. Since this is lineup and this is the Scott Connor forte, I'm going to pass it to him here on what he thinks of this one.
Yeah, I mean, at first glance, I'm sitting here going, let's see, best asset in the trade is maybe the 24 first. I think you're doing yourself a favor if you're getting a first for Kamara, 23 or 24. Then I'm going down the line. I'm going, let's see, who would I next prefer? Probably Darren Waller, even though he has a shit market at this point. It doesn't matter. I think he's got a better shot, given he plays a scarcer position, than Paris Campbell or Devin Duvernay, so give me that. Honestly, I'd probably take a third for Paris Campbell or Devin Duvernay in a lineup league, just because they're most likely a roster clogger. So I think with the way you described your team, the way that someone could beat you the way you built your team is probably not trade with you, but unfortunately you got a great deal here. So I got to go with your side by quite a bit. So
yeah, Mike.
Yeah, you hit it on the head, Scott. Adam and I we talked a little bit about this trade before he made it. And he's just asking, like, what should I sell Kamara for? And I'm going, man, I'm looking at your team, and he's definitely in that area where I guess you could play the variance and maybe sneak into the playoffs. And lineup leagues, you can kind of do that where you kind of hope the best happens once you get into the playoffs. But I always hate it, man. It just puckers my asshole. And I'm like, man, if you could sell Kamara right now, you're looking at a possible suspension next year. Like, this is probably your last chance to get off of him. I'd go ahead and do it. I'm asking for a first and a second. And if he'll do it, great. And then he sends me this one back. He goes, this is what I was offered. And I go, I almost want the second a little more than Darren Waller just because of the way he's at. But it's not a bad asset in a tight end premium league. Just kind of shoot your shot on and hope he has a rebound. And the other dudes, you touched on it, man. Duvernay, Paris Campbell. You said it was a start 10, Adam. Like, dude, how many times are you going to push the button on those guys in a lineup league and feel good about it? So I'll take the third. Just give me the third. I love this deal for you. I understand it from the Schumer perspective. Like, if he's competing and like really going for it, I don't understand like the Duvernay Campbell thing. Maybe that's just a depth thing. But to go get Kamara, I probably wouldn't have sent you Waller back for sure. Like if I'm on the other side of this, it's like Waller ain't a thing. I'll give you a first and a third, and that's where we'll start for these guys.
Yeah, I think what's interesting. So Schumer's team is one of these teams where, like this league, that's another thing about it. That's kind of why I actually was thinking about not pressing the button on the first initial trade, not to when we got to this point. Initially, was it's one of these teams, Scott, or this leagues where there's not really this clear defined elite group yet. You know what I mean? Now we have one of our shitheads, our Savage member. He basically took my strategy. So part of the problem with taking picks is he's got 423s and 424s. T-Rock, the little, fucker, he's got our strategy in my league. It's like, fuck, man, he's got that by the ball. So I'm kind of hamstrung on what to do, and I'm kind of could tell myself maybe I could win. But the reality for me here is this. Kamara, even if you really love him on the contending side, which I think there's reasons to, but if I'm getting the 24 first, right, and then I'm getting Waller, which I think right now people are ready to write him off, and they're worried that the injuries are never going to go away. He's 30. I mean, that offense, even when if he's healthy, last week had 0. Like, there's a lot of concern, I think, with Waller. For me, I'm willing to buy because of the fact that it's tight end premium and the fact that he's such a scarce asset. I think that's the big piece for me that made me completely willing to gamble, aside from the fact that I think the 24 first for Kamara is probably a good pivot on a build like that I had already. And then the third was basically just, I wanted that extra little grease piece for one of these guys, but I probably, push came to shove, I probably would have done it without the third. I'll say this, though. Schumer's team is built pretty good compared to the rest. Kamara does give him a real chance to win this year. Like, I don't know if he's the best team in the league, but I'll say this. This probably looks bad, but if you win the league, even if it's a bad trade, you won the money, right? So I guess that's where, from Schumer's perspective, I understand it. Let's get into somebody else's trades, though, not just talk about me up here. Go ahead.
We got our boy Castle Black on here, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
We're getting DK, Pollard, Mooney, Elijah Moore for Jalen Waddle and Damian Pierce. Scott, I'm interested to see what do you think about this deal, man? So this is a lot of kind of what we preach for. What are the league settings here, Adam?
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say, Scott. I'm going to pass it to Scott first here, especially because this is a Superflex lineup, start 10. So we're going to stay basically in the same lane as that last one. Start 10, Superflex lineup.
Yeah, I mean, I thought you were going to go down the best ball road, and I'm going, okay, I got to reassess this. But I think you're looking at in a start 10. I mean, we don't know any of the other settings, but I think one of the most important things is even in 30-man roster leagues, there's guys I still want to pick up. And I'm looking at, if you just kind of like deconstruct this trade and you say, okay, what can I go put Darnell Mooney or Elijah Moore on the block for and get realistically?
Right.
A second for both, maybe. And that's probably, you need to have a buyer in your league. Everyone may say, oh, no, they're worth more than a second, but you need a buyer at that price. Otherwise, they're kind of roster cloggers to a high degree with high flip potential if any of them do anything. But I look at this, and it's like it's a 4 for 2. You're getting the 2 best players in the trade, at least right this second. You can argue DK versus Pierce, Pollard getting thrown in. But like I look at this as I have now 2 roster spots to play with. And they're much closer to Elijah Moore and Darnell Mooney than what their trade value would be. So give me the Waddle and Pierce side. If it's me, I'm probably looking to flip Pierce, downgrade to Pierce, because I think you probably you can get a strong 2 for 1 if you were to move Pierce. So I still think he's a live asset to move, but I would just take the 2 side. Gives me 2 free roster spots. And if it's one of those 24-man roster leagues or something like that, like most 2 roster spots are worth even more. Like, arguably, you can find guys similar impact to like Darnell Mooney on waivers. So yeah, give me the Waddle and Pierce side, easy.
What about you, Mike? I'll let you go, and then I'll go, and we'll get another trade too.
So if I'm looking at it like with the ascension and the way Tua's playing with Waddle and Metcalf, like, I don't know. I'm such a DK stan that they're close for me, at least, at the very least. So if I just cancel those two out, Pierce for Mooney, Pollard, Elijah Moore, you know how much I love to tear down. And I don't really want to buy into the Dameon Pierce thing. But my Darnell Mooney love is still there. My Elijah Moore love is still there. And I'm probably going to ride him into the ground and be heartbroken and go like, man, I should have just listened to Scott. I should have just listened to Scott and just fucking got rid of these dudes. The Tony Pollard thing, God, it is so frustrating with Tony Pollard because you see what happens when there's no Ezekiel Elliott. Like, this is RB1 almost every single week. Like, he is that explosive and that good for that offense. But the more and more it goes on and the more and more Jerry Jones talks, it's just like, this is never going to happen. Like, this is never going to be the level. We're going to get like 1 or 2 weeks a year, and that's it.
Yeah, you're going to –
all we're going to get.
But the worst part is you get to see it. See, that's the worst part is you get to see it a couple times, and then it's like, all right, Zeke's going to come back and take the workload. Let me say this. Let me ask Scott this question. So, Scott, for you, what is the difference in a setting like this? Superflex lineup, start 10. Obviously, we don't have the other parts of the league, but – in a start 10 lineup league, what's the difference for you between Waddle and Metcalf? Let me ask that question.
I mean, I think when you get into start 10, they're both probably in the lineup regardless for the most part.
Right.
Definitely Waddle, but Metcalf for the most part, you're probably clicking him inside your, last flex or two most weeks.
Right.
So I could see doing a Waddle to DK pivot down.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm doing that, I'm okay taking, like, in that range, you're either betting on Waddle to kind of fall a little bit back to the pack, or you're betting on DK kind of staying up with the pack. It's one of those two outcomes. If you think they're closer than the market says, that's a great place to do the strong 2-for-1. So, I mean, if you wanted to sell me that it's DK Metcalf and Tony Pollard for Jalen Waddle,
yeah,
I'd probably still go the Waddle side, but I could also see where someone's going, all right, I'm getting – because if you have one of those running back rooms where you can just say, you know what, I'm playing Pollard every week the rest of the year, you're going to probably get 3 or 4 games that are 15-plus points. You might get 3 or 4 games that are less than 8, but you have to be committed to saying I'm playing him every week. If you're just going to trade for Pollard and go, yeah, he's the third guy off my bench, then I don't want to do that type of deal. But some rosters, it makes sense to do it, but that's a 2-for-1.
And
that's not also giving up Dameon Pierce for another 2-for-1 on the other end where, and they're not 2 guys I'm excited the rest of the year that I'm going to be able to flip. That's the issue. I
get you. Okay. So really, and to your point too, like when you talk about, on Destination Dynasty and Dynasty and Chill, like the roster approach that you take in a league like this, like Tony Pollard is somebody that you're very interested in because he's RB2, like, he's going to fill that spot. Perfectly fine. I think I get, though, why you're saying the difference from Pierce to Mooney and Elijah Moore could offset it, especially given these settings.
If you trade for Pollard in a deal like this, like I'm all about, I call it the old 80-40 deal or 80-60 deal, if you've heard me talk about that before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking an asset worth $1, and I'm breaking it up for 2 assets. One's worth 80 cents, one's worth 40 to 60 cents.
Mm-hmm.
The goal being that I think that 80-cent asset can appreciate or stay around that dollar range when things are going good, and I'm getting an asset that is not just a third or something on the other side. I'm also getting a strong number 2 asset that could also appreciate, and maybe I can flip for a profit. So that's the 2-for-1 approach. I'm okay doing that, but if you're going to make Pollard the second piece, you need to have the ability to get him in your lineup. I see a lot of people, they go, man, I'm really worried about my running back depth in a start 9 or a start 10. And then they tell me they got Josh Jacobs, Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon, and, Dameon Pierce, but they're worried about their running back depth. And I go, dude, there's no reason to go trade for another running back on a team like that because he's on your bench. I get it. We're getting down to crunch time. If there's a trade deadline, you want to kind of set yourself up for the last, 4 or 5 weeks of the season, but it's week 9. So, he's got to be committed in this trade. You're starting Pollard most weeks. And I think in a start 10, you guys would agree, you don't just jam Pollard in a flex if you have 11 or 12 other good players, right? He's not really giving you any value unless you have a 0 RB room where it's like, dude, I love playing Pollard every week. I'll just live with his ups and downs because I have 6 superstar receivers that are getting thrown in there every week.
That's a good point because Pollard, to your point, right, if he's your RB2 in a hero RB or zero RB approach, like that's perfectly fine. I think the reality though is with him in lineup start 10, bye weeks maybe, or when he's going to play the big role when Zeke's out like last week, that's where you're going to for sure push the button on him. Otherwise, like he's one of those guys that you're just constantly battling back and forth. Do I start him or do I not start him, which is tough. Like there's a part of me that does like all the value on that Castle Black side, but the other problem is I think the settings here, like Mooney and Elijah Moore, they're guys that I hate to admit this on, but like Mooney in start 10 probably is not the best, most appealing guy. It's just the reality. And Elijah Moore, man, I was high on him, and this sucks to where he's at. I think the other problem was him not being moved at the deadline. I mean, this guy's not even getting targeted, let alone this offense doesn't necessarily look that good. I still want to buy the talent of Elijah Moore, but I think I understand why you take the top side. And I think for me, it's not really Metcalf and Waddle. I think you could make an argument for either one of those guys. I think it's the Pierce versus the three of those assets in the lineup league. So I get why you're taking the other side too, though, Scott.
Let me ask one question to you two while we got this up here. I mean, we don't get Scott on often, so I got to pick his brain as much as possible.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of already made my feelings known about the Waddle Metcalf thing, and I could be completely wrong on it, but they're closer for me. If I'm Castle Black in this situation, and like say maybe I'm more of a productive struggle or rebuild looking towards the future, if I swap out, because I wouldn't, this is being completely honest, I wouldn't take a Tony Pollard back in that situation, period.
No, right.
This is a non-starter. You keep him, you do whatever. But say you swapped out a Tony Pollard for something like maybe like a Jahan Dotson. Would that interest you anymore, Scott? Like where you take two pieces and you kind of break it up into four that you think maybe could have a hit or value ascension? Now, DK Metcalf's going to be hard to have a value ascension because he's already valued pretty highly in most people's mind. But Mooney's depressed. Elijah Moore obviously is depressed. Jahan Dotson's been out for a few weeks now. And if it was a guy like that or a player of that type, would that interest you more in this kind of pivot from Waddle and Pierce into more of a long-term outlook, like trying to hit a home run somewhere else?
I mean, I think that's a little more appealing. I think also you kind of just look at this, forget about the names. If you just put this in the form of like a chart with numbers, I'm looking at this going, okay, I have to have a active market that is willing to free flow picks, that is willing to have some convicted managers in the league that go, I believe in Darnell Mooney, I believe in Elijah Moore. They have to be assets that I can move. Otherwise, the reality is those guys are a lot closer to like the back end roster spots that are a lot closer to like the waiver wire level players. Right. Unless it's an active market, really what is Darnell Mooney? All he is a guy you could probably get a third for him. Probably can't get a second. If you dropped him, someone would unload the clip and bid everything they have to pick him up. But then they would go, yeah, he's the 16th player on my roster. Why would they be rostering him at that point? To hope they can maybe flip him because he's a much more flippable asset than, the 29th player on your team in a start 10, right? So I think that I see the Castle Black side if it's one of those leagues where in 2 games, if Elijah Moore has, 18 targets in the next 2 weeks, he can flip him for a first. If that's the case, then do it. But a lot of leagues, you're kind of going, at least what I've seen, a lot of leagues, those types of trades, especially heading into this 23 class, are a lot harder to pull off. It's almost like you can have Elijah Moore, but if I'll tell you that in the next 2 years, not a single soul will be interested in trading for him, what did I really get?
So, I can see that.
Adam, I think this is our fault. This is our fault. Castle Black's out here listening to us all the time, and he traded for 3 guys we did videos on.
There you go. But
Darnell Mooney, Elijah Moore.
But see, this is. I'll say this too. On the value perspective, like if you looked at all the assets, right? Scott broke down a lot of the stuff that matters and why this lineup setting matters. If you just look at the value, it probably could make sense if you just looked at dynasty values of the 4 versus the 2 and you combine them all together, right? But I think here's the thing. This is where this trade show should really help you is understanding that, okay, this is a start 10 league. This start 10 league, this is probably not the trade you want to make. If we're talking start 12, start 13, maybe a little bit different discussion. Even if you still want the other side, that's fine, but it's better in a start 12 or start 13 to have the bottom side. And then if we go to best ball, we're having a totally different conversation. I think ultimately those are the things. Trades like this, I think, really should be talked about in all those different settings because you may not understand it until we have like Scott on here and we break it down why they're so different with start 10, start 12, start 13, and then best ball, whatever your starters are. So I thought that was a good discussion.
Let me just add this one more point. I think that the tiebreaker here is the market that your league plays in.
That's a great point too.
I just saw Tony Pollard traded for a 24 first today.
Now
I've seen Elijah Moore. I've seen people trading Elijah Moore at times, not in the last couple weeks, but at times you could easily see a scenario where he's worth a 24 first. Let's say everything went great over the next month. Unlikely, but so if you're in one of those leagues, you could take this trade and go, you know what? I'm going to be patient, but there's a shot that this ends up being Jalen Waddle and Dameon Pierce for DK Metcalf and 2 firsts. And if we put 2 firsts in there and take away the 3 pieces, you're going, that's a smash.
Castle
trade,
Black.
Right?
Great point, Scott, because that's another thing about knowing your league, because see, that's where on the value aspect, like Mike was talking about, right, earlier, of if you're rebuilding and let's say Pollard was Dotson instead, right? If you know that your league is more like that, it makes a lot of sense to go to that in a rebuild. Whereas, to your point, like in a lot of markets probably you and I play in, Mike plays in, like you may not be able to get, like I have not seen many Tony Pollard for a 24 first go down, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? So we're talking more on the generic market standpoint, but to your point, man, everybody's league could be different. So that's a very, very good point.
Yep.
Yeah, shit, man. We just did a trade last week where we saw Sam Ellinger go for a 24 second. Like,
yeah,
there are people out there who will do crazy shit.
Absolutely. So here we go. We got Redwoods. Go ahead, man.
We got Alec Pierce, Daniel Bellinger, a 23 first, going for my guy, TJ Hawkinson, and a 23 third. Adam, what are the league settings on this?
So here's what I got. I don't actually have best baller lineup, but I do have, it's a rebuild. There's no tight end premium, and that first is a late first.
Okay. All right, Scott, what
so
do you think
we can talk about it from both lenses. We don't have to dive too much into it, but we can talk about it from both lenses.
Yeah. Man, I think I probably lean the pick side with Bellinger and Alec Pierce, just because it does feel like you're basically just betting on, is Hawkinson is what he is, or is there more gas left in the tank? I think I would cash out on the pick. And you know, it's interesting, a totally different tangent, but with a guy like Bellinger, I think we're starting to see a shift in tight ends in Dynasty too. Like the anymore, like if you are given opportunity or earn opportunity, like we may end up with 4 or 5 rookie tight ends this year that finish in like the top 24. And they came out of nowhere, and people always just assume, rookie tight ends can't do much. I definitely don't want to count on giving me anything in the first year. So who knows? I like the first side. Pierce and Bellinger are just extra pieces, but I think I'd almost take the first for Hawkinson straight up.
All right, man. You know TJ Hawkinson's my guy. University of Iowa. I always love TJ Hawkinson. And we just talked about it on the AMA, right, when we did it with Eric. I think it's an uptick for him going from the Lions to the Vikings. Now, I don't know by how much, but I can just acknowledge that I'd much rather have Kirk Cousins throwing me the football in that offense than Jared Goff. Mm-hmm. With all that being said, but yeah, I'm taking the pick. I'm taking the pick at Alec Pierce and Daniel Bellinger. And a lot to Scott's point with the tight end like Daniel Bellinger. Nice dart throw for a lot of us that we had that we just kind of chucked, maybe in the 4th round, maybe in the late 3rd, whatever the hell you did. Maybe you got him on waivers, for Christ's sakes. I like it. Like we kind of talked about it on 4D there where we were doing it on the fuck around and find out scale. Like I'm willing to fuck around and find out about Daniel Bellinger to see if he's a real deal. I think the pick itself is probably worth more than what TJ Hawkinson is. Unless it's like some crazy like super tight end premium or start 2 tight ends. And
here's the other thing: it's no tight end premium too, guys.
Oh my gosh! Yes.
And I'll think. Let me finish this one, because the reason I said we don't have to talk about it too much between best ball and lineup is this. I'll just finish the point here, where the 23 first is, in my opinion, at least equal to, even in a best ball league, TJ Hawkinson. Probably more, but at least equal to, even if it's back end, right? Here's the thing. Think about it this way. In lineup, you'd rather just have the 23 first, but you're also getting the Bellinger side, and you're getting Pierce, which I'd probably still rather have than a 3rd, if I'm being real, right? That's on the lineup lens. Now here's the thing in best ball. What's so crazy about this is Bellinger and Hawkinson in best ball. Like, I'd be very interested to see what the difference is with their consistency and their spike weeks, right? Now, let's admit, the 1 week TJ Hawkinson went bananas. It's not in the range of outcomes for Daniel Bellinger. But I bet you it's a lot closer than you'd think just on that aspect. Then let alone you're getting Pierce for the third. And then you still have the 23 first, which is liquidity to play with. I think in best ball, it's maybe even more of a smash. So, Redwoods, man, I'm going to just give you a great job. There's not a lot more to discuss. We'll just hit you with that. Like, that's an easy one. And you didn't put lineup or best ball, but you won either way. So,
buddy, I'm just glad that you didn't applaud your own trade.
I couldn't do that. I definitely couldn't do that. I'll let you guys do that for me, you know?
All right, so we got our boy, Zach. I'm not good here. He's acquiring Rachaad White for a 23 second, and he says it's mid to late. 5-3?
5-3 is the current record of that
5-3.
team.
Okay, perfect.
Yep, so it's a 12-team Superflex PPR. It's a lineup league. He's acquiring Rachaad White for his 23 second, and he's on a contender, and he's currently 5-3.
All right, Scott, man. Let us know, man. Lineup. Rachaad White or that 23 late second?
Yeah, I don't hate this trade for getting the Rachaad White side, pending, again, in lineup that it makes sense for the way you constructed your team.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you can slot Rachaad White in there as your 4th or 5th running back, and you kind of wait for potential times to start him over the next 8 weeks, then I'm totally good with it. Because you're probably looking at a similar, assuming you have to make that pick, you're probably looking at a similar type placeholder. Maybe you get a better player than Rachaad White, but I think you're looking for the same prototype of what you're going to draft with that second. I think that's kind of how we approach a lot of like late seconds through 4ths in lineup. Is there might be selective times where you take a shot on a tight end or you take a shot on a receiver, but for the most part, you're starting to eat up the capital running backs at that point. Anybody drafted that's going to get opportunity. And I think here's the other thing. I've been thinking about this more. We've had this debate in the DD Discord a lot about, why still won't people pay seconds for Jamal Williams and whatnot, and yet they won't sell guys like David Montgomery for a second. It's like they're basically the same thing at this point, except for one of them had a previous history of being a workhorse and had some pedigree, and the other didn't.
Yeah.
But at this point in their career, are they that much different? And I think when you look at some of the warp stuff too, if you get 4 starts out of a running back over a 3 or 4 year period, you've pretty much made up that mid to late second round pick. So if you think about it that way, like if you're buying a running back, maybe not Jamal Williams, maybe not Deontay Foreman, because there's a shot like next year, they're never in the same situation they are this year, right? Like it's this year and bust. But a guy like Rachaad White, like worst case scenario, what is he? Tony Pollard, Darrell Henderson, you know what I mean? So he's not going to disappear. So I think that this is actually a sneaky move. Now, if he goes to 0, okay, you missed. But I'm pretty sure if you look back at this deal in 3 years, and I told you got 6 to 8 shots over a 3 or 4 year period where you can at least try to play Rachaad White, that's worth the risk of the pick right there. So I like this type of process move, especially if it's a late second. I like it.
Because it's a late second, like I'm fully aboard. Like I would definitely pay this for Rachaad White, specifically not only because I like Rachaad White, I like his talent, but if you just take the player out of it, players like Rachaad White, kind of to your point, Scott, they seem to fucking hang around forever, man. Like I still remember heading in before they drafted Rachaad White, people trading like 3rd round picks, like decent 3rd round picks to go get Keyshawn Vaughn because it was like, well, this is the year. This is the year that Keyshawn Vaughn becomes something. And then it just seems to take forever for even the guys who die out and go to 0 to actually hit that point. So you're making a good bet here where if he does become something more, great. You win the trade. Mm-hmm. Even if he starts to fade and never really reaches that, like you have so many chances for outs to even go back, from a mid to late second, like to go back to possibly an early 3rd in a year or whatever the case may be, and still kind of cash out at 80, 75% value and then shoot your shot on something else. So I like it for Zach. And for me to say that about Zach buying a backup running back is a big step for me. I feel like I've accomplished something tonight.
I was going to say, we've all grown just by Mike admitting that on air. It's just, that's something he doesn't really like to do with our boy Zach. I'll say this. I think there's a lot of ways to look at this, and I think when I look at late 23 first, right? Whatever year it is, late seconds. I'm sorry. Those tend to be like recoupable assets, and not just that. You start getting in those late seconds. Could you hit? Sure, but like how real is it 1-for-1 that Rachaad White loses enough value to where he's out of the conversation of the value in this late second, early third range next year? Like, even if he just does what he's doing right now, he's probably in that conversation, right? Leonard Fournette's getting older. That offense isn't that great. If they decide to give him more work, there's so many scenarios where Rachaad White not only exceeds what that pick value is, but like if we talk about it from a best ball perspective, 1-for-1, you just give me the shot of Rachaad White for a late second. I mean, this would be a absolute no fucking brainer for me in best ball too. So he doesn't actually say. Oh, he does say lineup. So let me he's talking from the lineup there. But if this was a best ball trade, I think it's even more of a smash. So let's get into another one, Mike. What do you got?
Oh shit! We just talked about Zach, and of course I got to talk about Khalil Herbert now.
I knew you'd go there, so I set this up just for you, buddy. You know,
this sucks, man. Khalil Herbert for an early that Brady has labeled here, 23 second and a 25 third. Scott,
talk to us, Scott. Talk to Mike especially.
Well, I was gonna say this, but it applies to this trade too. Like this is one of those deals, like the Rachaad White trade, where obviously I'm getting a better second here. But I also think if you're in a situation where, let's say, you're not contending and you're not trying to slot in a guy like Khalil Herbert or Rachaad White, I'd be okay if I'm out of it for this year. I always tell people, if you can get a 2-for-1 on the sell side, sell every running back. I don't care if it's Rachaad White. I don't care if it's Khalil Herbert, because I also look at these guys and say, if I have a second and a third, I can easily recoup this by drafting another running back with the same type of pedigree. Now, okay, you're going to argue, well, Khalil Herbert's looked good. He has much less chance of busting as next year's Zamir White or Isaiah Spiller, or whoever the hell else you're going to take. So you're taking a little risk there. But I think this just comes down to, I can see where the seller's going, all right, I'm getting an early second for Khalil Herbert. I'm getting an extra third that I know it's 2025, but it's an extra asset. So I can see the sell side for the same argument that you can make about, not buying Rachaad White if you're not contending at all. So I see both sides. I think I'd probably still lean the Herbert side, because I do think he's one of those guys that's done enough that you have potential to get more. But if you said this was the best I could get in my market, I'm okay with it. Because the odds, like, I remember seeing what you guys' reaction was with the Pollard for a 24 first. Khalil Herbert kind of feels the same thing.
Oh my goodness, really?
So if you get a first for him, when's that going to happen? And I think one of the other underrated aspects about that discussion, a lot of the times, and I'm going to look at Mike when I say this too. You may love Khalil Herbert. You may have a 1 or 2 week period in his entire dynasty career to get a first. More often than not, the team doesn't sell during that week.
Right.
Because they're so fucking excited about throwing him in there and hitting a top 5 week. They can't do it.
Yeah.
And that
he's
one
killing,
window,
he's smashing, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
the Tony Pollard's going to start 2 games and Zeke's out for 2 games. That's the week where you're spam him, even if you've built your team around, I can start Tony Pollard and I'm so excited. But a lot of people don't. They wait, they start him, they wait for Zeke to come back, and they go, hey, anyone want to give me a first? It's like, no, you missed your window. So
yeah, you know what? That is a great point. That's something I talk about all the time on 40 Chess. That's the human element, right? That you can't bake into the generic values of shit, because people, when you have a smashing asset, have such a hard time separating themselves from that player and those points in their roster from long-term values and true value right now today too, as far as dynasty. So I really like that point. I would say this, man. Mike, I'll kick it to you. I don't have a whole lot to say on this. If you had to do this, like, I guess I could understand it. For me, though, knowing especially that it's early in 23, this class, like, I think that at minimum you're going to have a chance to draft a better prospect at running back at that 23 second because of this class. Not to mention, you have a chance at getting if receivers are following, right? You might even get someone like, who the hell knows what's going to happen with a Will Levis or something. Like, I just see so many fucking scenarios with that early second. Forget the 25 third for a second. that make me really pause about going to Khalil Herbert, because here's the thing. Khalil Herbert's actually looked – I'll give Zach credit, even though we told him to sit Khalil Herbert when he was the only one that wanted to start at him. And that was the week Montgomery got hurt. So, of course, like, oh, my gosh, are you kidding me? Like, he goes off, and we're like, sorry, Zach. But even Khalil Herbert's looked better than Montgomery a lot of times, but they're still not, like, giving him the work yet. So, like, if that was still to come out of the situation, I can understand going to Herbert. For me, though, paying the 23 early second for Herbert today, I don't think I would want to do that. So that's where I want to go to Miller's side. But, like, if your team's really constructed right and you just need a couple extra plugger bodies in there, even if it's a slight overpay, if he ends up breaking away from that backfield as much as they run the ball, like, there's probably a scenario where it wins out. It's just not the way I typically do my process.
So a few things on this one. As everybody knows, I'm not the biggest Khalil Herbert fan. Like, I understand the appeal of him, but let's be fucking honest about where it is. I mean, when Monty has been in there, he's been given the work. Yep. And this was finally the week where Khalil Herbert got pretty close to what Monty was getting for work when healthy and finally outproduced him. Like, it took a lot, and you finally saw it. When Monty's not in there, Khalil Herbert looks awesome and everybody comes over. But this is kind of like the Zeke and Pollard thing. Like, is it ever really going to happen for it? I don't know. The other thing I look at, you kind of touched on it a little bit, Adam. When I look at it early 23 second, like, there's a lot of guys that interest me in this range, right? If I just look at some of the mock drafts that they did over at Destination Devy, man, there's a time where Blake Corum's going there, Sean Tucker, you got Devin Achane, Michael Mayer, Zach Charbonnet. However you feel about those guys, and that's not saying one of these quarterbacks like you talked about falls. I mean, we've seen first-round drafted quarterbacks fall to the early part of deep
Mac Jones
rookie draft classes, right? Mac Jones, for example, where positional value just becomes like, fuck, man, I'd much rather have a Mac Jones type in his rookie year than a guy like Khalil Herbert from what we've seen. The other part that I have is there's so many running backs out there that have produced previously far more than what Khalil Herbert has ever done, and currently are producing more than what Khalil Herbert's doing, that you can get for an early second. And people would be happy to get off of them. One of the guys that gets dunked on all the time, one of my favorites, right? Antonio Gibson. Everyone loves to hate him, and I'm the only one that seems to defend him. I love you, Antonio. But if you offered half your league, like if you went through all of your leagues and offered everybody who owns Antonio Gibson an early 23 second, I would say a lot of people would just hit the button. Like, I'm just going to move on with my life. And that's an asset that I feel better about. Like, I've seen him do it in the past. He's currently producing more than what Khalil Herbert is doing. I just think there's so many better ways to spend this type of asset in early 23 second, whether it's holding for the rookie pick or whether it's buying a different type of running back or whatever the hell you want to do other than Khalil Herbert. And that doesn't even take into account that somehow Brady, out of this whole thing, got a 25 third just tossed in. Like, yeah, I'm going to need that too. Just go ahead and give it to me. I don't care if that was a 29 third. Cool.
I got an extra pick. I don't understand why it has to be so far out. Scott, I don't know if you wanted to say anything before we move on from this one other than that.
No, I was going to say Mike makes an awesome point that this is one of those deals where not knowing anything about the managers and not anything about the teams. If you're trading that pick for Khalil Herbert and you're going to treat him like we talked about with Tony Pollard a couple of trades ago, and he's just in your lineup, you're willing to eat the ups and downs the rest of the year, and you say, I love Khalil Herbert, that's the guy I wanted to occupy that spot the rest of the season, I'm okay with the deal. More than often not, though, the trade like this is I'm trying to get ahead of the game because I'm forecasting that Khalil Herbert is so good that he's going to, quote unquote, take over the backfield next year and be better. And this guy still may be trading for the RB 4 or 5 on his team. He gave up the flexibility of that early second for a speculative play next year on a guy that doesn't have any pedigree. So he essentially just paid like market price to assume all of the risk.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. If he's not putting Khalil Herbert in his lineup the rest of the season, most likely he's going to get a 0 ROI on the rest of the year with that trade now. And then we flip to February. In February, not knowing anything about what the Bears are going to do, what asset would you rather have from January to May? It's not Khalil Herbert. And in fact, it's not a lot of players in Dynasty at all.
Correct.
It's probably less than 30 or 40 players you'd rather have over that damn 202 or 203.
Right.
Now, you get to August, you're going to be going, all right, there's a lot of players I'd trade a future second for. But for that window, he's just putting himself behind the 8 ball. And I see a lot of trades like this is one of those where if I know managers in my league are player-based and they have biases on certain players and they just have to get that guy because they believe in him, more often I'm just going to fade. I'm just going to take the liquidity of the pick, and I'll move my picks around when I can buy more sure thing assets later on.
Man, such a good point, because the dynasty timing is something I think that's underappreciated in dynasty, right? Because right now everyone's looking at Khalil Herbert, 16 carries, 99 yards, and you're saying, oh, he's going to take over the backfield. There is way more time in the offseason than there is during the season. And there's so many trades that happen. And the 23 early second is, especially even with that class starting to not show all the allure that maybe everybody had hoped for, it's still going to be an extremely valuable class this offseason. And there's going to be a ton of time where that pick's worth a shit ton. This is the other piece I think that hasn't been touched on for me. So if I'm on a contender, and the way I look at this is I would only make this move if I'm a contender, right? If I'm on a contender and I have teams like this where I'm sitting on somebody's early second because it's not mine, one, that person tends to try to come to me over and over and over again trying to get that fucking pick back because it's basically a first-round pick, right? And then also you have the fact that there's so many people in your league that are going to want to go get that pick because they don't have to bet against you. That pick is etched in stone early, as you see on the card, right? That pick today carries the early weight. I can move that pick for mountains on a contender, and I do not want to do that for Khalil Herbert. So as we talk about this more and more, I'm absolutely loving what Miller did, man. I'm going to take that side here. I really am. So let's go ahead and get into the next one. Koopa Troopa, our guy here. Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, man. Koopa gets a third and a 24 second. He sends away Brandon Cooks and hot off of last week, Deontay Foreman.
So let me tell you the settings, and we'll start with Scott because it is a start 10 lineup. There you go. And obviously this is a rebuild if you're doing this.
I would hope so. I would hope so.
As you say that, though, this is the type of deal in a start 10 where I'll go through and I go, all right, this is where I can actually add some liquidity on teams where I'm smashing. It can actually be a team where you go, I think you said it at the beginning of the show, Adam, in the start 10, you actually can be a contender and trade away win now pieces and still go, the only thing I'm really foregoing is my margin for errors going down a little bit. But really, like, I'm already in position where, let's say I'm going to finish top 2 or I'm going to get a bye or I know I'm going to make the playoffs. What's the harm in shipping Brandon Cooks for a second? Even if you are a win now team, why the hell not? Because I look at it and I go, if I'm a win now team, truly a win now team that has championship aspirations, do I really even want Brandon Cooks in my lineup? Like, something had to probably go wrong where I'm having to play him at week 14, 15, 16, 17.
Correct.
Obviously, week 9, 10, whatever, during buys, okay, he might be in the lineup.
Right, bye week fill in, but
roster,
he's not a championship staple for your team. Correct, yeah.
Exactly, and that's how you build not just good teams. That's how you build monsters. When you have a top 2 team, and you go, all right, let me pull from my quote unquote bench or spare parts or excess and start flipping them to other teams that need win now players. Sure, you could end up facing one of those guys in the playoffs and they could have a spike week and they knock your ass out. Okay, you lost. More often than not, what you do is you get other teams that are in 5th, 6th, 7th place. They go, man, I need some win now pieces because maybe they don't have any depth or they have a thin team or they've had some injuries. And you go, all right, sure. I'm a win now team, but I'm going to trade you my, insert whatever receiver that's barely worth the first. I'm going to trade you my Chris Godwin for your 23 first. I can still beat you, but man, I smash you if you miss the playoffs. I have your first and I still beat you. And really all I did was pull from like my asset chest where I'm shaving off a little on my margin for error. So long story short, I would take the pick side here regardless. But I could also see somebody picking this trade regardless of where they stand, whether they're a contender or whether they're rebuilding. So just wanted to kind of make that point that it can be on both sides. Because in a start 10, I mean, honestly, I'm not sure Deontay Foreman or Foreman's more likely in my lineup than
Okay.
Brandon Cooks.
Well,
So
okay, I'm glad you said that, and I'll take it from here, and I'll pass it to Mike in a second here. I think what's interesting about what you said is that the Cooks for the second, really, especially if you don't know where that second's going to land, how that team is, maybe you convince a team that's not very good to take Cooks. I can see all those scenarios where that makes sense. My thing is based off of how Foreman played the last couple weeks, selling for a third feels light. That's the part of the deal that I'm having the harder time with. It's not necessarily even the second for Cooks, because I think truthfully, especially with him not getting traded, that's probably about right. Like, you ain't getting someone to really pay up for Brandon Cooks knowing that it's going to be Davis Mills the rest of the year and there's no certainty. On a contender, though, I understand having him for bye weeks is key. But the second, like, I'm not going to really fight that too much. I just think Foreman for the third, you coming off the smash weeks, once again, going back to that human element aspect, I think you at least get a couple thirds or something north of just a single third. So that'd be my only criticism. But like,
is Cooks worth a second? Because now there's talks he doesn't want to play anymore. You know, like you could almost sell me if someone came to me and said, I have the right roster construction, I will give you Deontay Foreman for Brandon Cooks. Like, it's not that far off, honestly. So I think it could go both ways. Like, you could almost say he's selling low on Cooks, but he's really getting out on Cooks, you know?
Fair. And I think one thing that's underrated about that too, Scott, is that the one thing that I think doesn't get enough consideration with picks is there is a finite number of picks, right? So in this league, you have 12 seconds, right? And if Brandon Cooks, I like Brandon Cooks, to be honest with you, but he is a very replaceable player because wide receiver runs so fucking deep. Like, you only have 12 seconds every year, and that pick always accrues value for the rest of the time. But Mike, interested in your thoughts too, man.
All right. So when I'm looking at it, this is definitely something, Scott, I've heard you talk about in the past and even currently, and you bring it back up. This is definitely something where I myself am not good at doing and that I haven't opened myself up to. But this is why I tap into smart people, is to get other opinions and go, you know what? You're damn right. In a start 9, start 10, for most cases, I would say start 11. This applies where it's like, if I do have excess, if I have an excess Brandon Cooks my 5th, 6th receiver. Deontay Foreman is like my 4th, 5th running back that I wasn't really planning on doing anything, just depth piece. There's really no point for me to hold on to them, right? Let me ride the variance. Let me sell them away. Let me get more liquidity that maybe I can move somewhere else if I actually do need it, or if I just build monsters for the future like you're talking about. In start 13, start 14, like some of these deeper leagues I have, I'm more likely to hold on to these guys because I've seen them just get absolutely wrecked by an injury here or there. And then pretty soon I'm starting a guy who's projected to score like 3 points in my last flex. And I'm going, oh, shit. Oh, shit. All this depth I had just went by the wayside because I'm starting so many players. In a best ball league, no doubt about it. If I'm any type of competing, I want the Brandon Cooks, Deontay Foreman. I will pay this all day long for one of these guys. The last point I have about it too is I think Brandon Cooks is one of those guys, like, not to get too much player-centric analysis, but Adam, you and I love talking about consistent weeks and spike weeks. Brandon Cooks right now at this point is more name and carries a lot of risk, kind of like what Scott was talking about. There's reports maybe he's not playing for the rest of the year. He's pissed off at the Houston. Deontay Foreman kind of carries some of that risk because maybe he's just a guy. And maybe once Chuba Hubbard comes back or they get Raheem Blackshear more involved, he falls off and you're just kind of riding this high and you're selling now. I'm more for it, especially when I look at Brandon Cooks. I'm like, how has Brandon Cooks been doing this year? Because you have this opinion of Brandon Cooks. Adam, he's only had 2 consistent weeks for a best ball approach where he's been above average.
He's having his worst year, I think, to date.
Yep. And he hasn't had a single spike week to this point through 7 weeks or 7 games of him playing. And now you have these other reports going out there and you're going like,
spike weeks ain't coming.
Like, fuck, man. At this point, I'd rather just have the 24-second. Like, I feel like that's a win. And then if I look at Deontay Foreman, I'm with you coming off what he has. I feel like maybe you could get more. But if I'm riding the high of the win of the 24-second for Brandon Cooks for what he's actually producing and what's going on now, like, I'm cool, man. You go ahead. You take Deontay Foreman. Good luck to you. I'll just take the liquidity and move on with my life.
Glad we talked that out, man, because that one was interesting for me when I looked at it too. I'm with you guys. Okay, so we're gonna start getting into some best ball here. Best ball, Big Corey. We got George Kittle, David Montgomery, and Rondale Moore being acquired for Breece Hall and a 24 third, Mike. And this is in best ball. I'll start with you, tear down best ball king, and we'll kick it to Scott here because we got Scott into some best ball leagues, so I want to hear Scott's best ball approach too. You know,
you got absolutely bailed out here, man. Like, if I'm
no better way to say that. Fuck me.
If I'm a contender right now, if anybody wants to bail me out of my Breece Hall shares for George Kittle, Montgomery, Rondale Moore, and all it cost me is a third throw-in, like, see ya. I love you, Breece. And definitely, like, Scott, you and I kind of differ on some of these injured running backs. And, you know, we talked a little bit on Twitter about it, but like, this is a bailout, man. Like, I'm not the biggest George Kittle fan, but in best ball, you know, it's just kind of whatever. He's kind of coming on as a late. You give me David Montgomery, gross, Rondale Moore. The best ball part, like, I just want the three assets that are actually fucking playing and have the possibility of scoring me points in my lineup versus one guy who's injured and a 24 third. Period.
Scott?
Like, these guys are all going to score points at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Mike because I actually value the injured running backs very little relative to everybody else. But in a lineup league, I still value them a lot more. Here, it's like you're playing that game where it's something happened this week. How can I get bailed out for the next week? If you can keep doing that, you're really never sitting on a Breece Hall that's giving you nothing. You know, I mean, how many weeks did you sit on Breece Hall before you got this type of deal? I'm guessing probably multiple weeks, but at the same time, were you even asking for a deal like this? Sometimes I guess you guys have more experience than me. Maybe you have to wait a couple weeks before you get trades like this. But yeah, like this would be the league where I'd be going, I need to move Breece Hall within 48 hours of the injury.
Yep.
And give me as many usable weeks as I can. I don't care if I'm getting probably at least one asset, potentially two assets that are fading pretty quickly. Who cares?
Right.
Who cares? You know, so I'm all that's a great trade for the Breece manager. Whoever sent him these pieces, I'd like to know what their plan is, because even if Breece comes back next year, is he guaranteed to give you any more potential spike weeks than like next year's David Montgomery? You know?
Well, here's the thing, Scott. I think about this. That's such a good point. You asked that question because let's even say, first of all, I think the answer is probably no. Is it possible? Of course, but I don't think it's guaranteed by any stretch.
Not on a coming back from an ACL injury. I don't think.
Exactly.
So you'd have to kick
exactly
into 2024 before you're probably sitting on the asset that you can then tear down for another strong deal the other way. He's gonna have to wait 2 years probably to make this deal in 2024 if he wanted to do the opposite. I think so.
I'm with you. And you know what? I'm going to tell you what this is. And Big Corey, I love what you did here. And I'm going to tell you, this reeks of managers that don't understand the difference of the two. Because here's the thing. I think you could be very easily talked into the fact that Breece Hall, when back healthy, is the by far and away best asset in this deal. Right? And so on a lineup perspective, if you play a lot of lineup leagues, you might be able to convince yourself, I'm getting a liquid third. I'm moving off of David Montgomery. George Kittle's bleeding value. And Rondale Moore, I mean, as much as he's starting to come on and I kind of like him, he's probably still in that roster clogger conversation for wide receiver. So I think, like, if you have more of a strictly lineup mindset and you don't understand the nuances, you make this deal not understanding what the hell you just fucked up with. Like this, you cannot. Here's the thing. Even if Breece Hall becomes Breece Hall again way quicker than we expect, you still didn't win this deal because you lost 3 fucking pieces that mean too much. Like in best ball, see, this is where the differences in the two league is significantly important to talk about because, like, I don't know. Let me ask you this, guy. Lineup, where are you at with this? You're rebuilding in lineup. So you're getting off of Kittle, you're getting off Montgomery, you're getting off Rondale Moore, you get Breece in the third.
Yeah, I mean, in lineup, it's a lot closer because I'm looking at Breece Hall as I have a streamlined asset that I think will bottom out and then it'll start to appreciate. And you might be getting okay value, but I think it's also very hard. Right now, if I had George Kittle, David Montgomery, and Rondale Moore, and I went to my league and said, somebody give me one single 23 first for all three of these, very good chance in a lineup league I don't have a single buyer.
Right.
People might give me other pieces, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever, but I want one strong piece. Unlikely I'm going to be able to send a 3 for 1. Breece Hall, I can say, give me a year. I bet you I can send Breece Hall for at least one piece, if not 2 pieces. So that's the difference. Like, the team that's getting Breece probably doesn't really care what happens in the next 6 months.
Yeah.
But I think in best ball next year, if they're playing it the way you guys talk about, and I listen to you guys when I'm starting to play, like I'm taking that even more agnostic approach on trades like this.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward a year from now, let's say it's opening day 2023. The guy that has Breece Hall probably doesn't have enough assets to be competitive next year.
Mm-hmm.
He's going, hey, who wants to give me a 2 for 1 for Breece Hall? And you're sitting here going like, maybe when he smashes again. But then even when he smashes, is someone really going to give you, a Dameon Pierce and another top 12 running back or a top 24 receiver in best ball for Breece Hall? Not necessarily. So really, where are you winning the Breece Hall trade unless in 2 years he becomes a top 3 running back in Dynasty again, and then you still need somebody in 2 years to bail you out. So I think it's a massive difference. This is a great example of the two discussions.
Yeah, and the last point too, I think in lineup, if you made this pivot to Breece Hall and you're really savvy, you don't even necessarily have to ride the wave and the what ifs of his season in his second year. You can probably pivot off of the value ascension of just seeing him on a treadmill, seeing him do these things before he even steps foot on the field, and people are going to remember, holy shit, this was RB1 when he was playing last year. He's coming back. You can pivot off of Breece Hall right then and there for a value gain, but in best ball, man, that's not fucking close.
Let me say this real quick on that.
Go ahead, buddy.
Adam, just before I get off it. When I look at it too, like this is kind of the deal on the other side with the Breece Hall part that I understand from, because there would definitely be a point probably from like February through July where you're talking about just running on a treadmill of the reports. We're in narrative season. Mm-hmm. Breece Hall is going to be valued more than any of those pieces on the other side. Mm-hmm. Period. All of them. Mm-hmm. All of them. And you can capitalize on the return there. The problem I have with it is if I'm on the other side, the reason I call it a bailout is you have to know that manager is looking as a contender as a fucking zero in his lineup that he has to hold. Mm-hmm. And if I'm looking at it, I'm going to put as much leverage as possible into it, being like, yeah, I'll give you George Kittle, but I'm going to need something else back. Like I'm going to give you George Kittle straight up. This is the best you're going to get. I need Breece in the third back.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I'm not going like, I'm also going to give you Montgomery. I'm also going to give you Rondale Moore. I'm going to go to the other people in my best ball league who are contenders, and I'm going to be like, who's going to give me a second for David Montgomery? Who's going to give me a second for Rondale Moore or 2/3 for Rondale Moore? Like, I'm going to piece those out instead of just giving you this bailout. Like, here, take 3 players that are actually playing and healthy, and then I'll take the 2 assets that aren't going to do anything. I'm not going to let you get away with that.
Yep, I'm with you. Moving on to this deal here, because I think we all pretty much agree on that one, and I think it was well done. Here with our boy the Who's, Blitz, in our Discord. He's acquiring Tyler Boyd. He's sending away Dearness Johnson, KJ Hamler, and a 23 late third. He did not give me league settings here, so we don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but we can talk lineup and best ball quickly on this one. Scott, what do you think, man?
I mean, come on. This is the equivalent of literally handing somebody 3 nickels and getting back a quarter.
That's why I said we don't have to discuss it long.
Yeah, what's your path getting the 3 pieces with? Maybe he was hoping there's a Hamler trade. Maybe he was hoping there was the Kareem Hunt trade. Like he's looking for something like that. But when you look at this and you go, it really doesn't even matter the format because I'm guessing even in best ball, you guys would be like, I'll pay this for Tyler Boyd, like because he's going to give you probably 3 or 4 spike weeks the rest of the year. And are you even getting 1 guaranteed on the other side? So this is easy trade. Give me Boyd all day.
That's the thing about it, though, is because, all right, let's say, I would say Hamler and best ball I'm very interested in, right? Because I think he's still has capability of spike weeks, and, he'll probably make your lineup a handful of times. Dearness Johnson right now is not seeing the field at all. You need, with Hunt not getting traded, at least an injury, if not a couple, for him to matter. And then a late 23 third, like, get the fuck out of here. Like, I don't understand how this gets done. I think he swindled the hell out of this other manager. Mike?
I think KJ Hamler at this point is just carrying a name. It's
he's kind of like a.
hey, he was a second round pick. Well, so was Denzel Mims.
True.
It's nothing. It's nothing at this point. When you talk about even in a best ball, maybe it makes your lineup a handful of times. He's done it a grand total of 0 times so far this year. So it's just Dearness Johnson. Obviously, like we kind of did a podcast where we talked about these deeper backup running backs, and in lineup leagues, it makes sense. Like I have become more on the Scott Connor, the Eric Van Eck approach, right? Like just I'm gonna throw a bunch of shit at the wall at running back. If any of these dudes pop, great. That's
right.
it.
We saw versus Denver that one week when Chubb and Hunt were both out, right? And he went bananas.
Yeah. In a best ball league, though, like this dude's gonna be a 0 for 99% of the season, more than likely.
Week.
The third, so I'm trading away 2 zeros that are absolutely nothing to me. This is from a best ball perspective for a guy who I know is going to make my lineup more times than not, and all it cost me was a late third.
And this is in the moment where Jamar Chase is out. Like it's just that.
Yeah, fucking
geez,
crazy.
Blitz, you shouldn't even have submitted that. This is just showing off. Cooper Kupp here. We have a 12-team Superflex lineup start 10. This is our boy Joka. He is getting Cooper Kupp. Actually, you know what? I don't know. It doesn't say on here what he's getting. I think maybe he's getting the other side, but it's Cooper Kupp for Rondale Moore, a 24 first and a 25 first. Lineup king. We'll go with Destination Dynasty Scott Connor on this one. Where are you at here, buddy?
I mean, Cooper Kupp's one of the most fascinating assets in any format, but in lineup especially because everything points towards the cliff, right? Everything about the situation, about his production not being sustainable. At the same time, like you look at like Barry's WARP data, and it's like he's up there with every other player in the league, and
he's
as
killing
much as you
WARP,
sit there, as much as you sit there and go, the Rams can't continue to play this way. They're probably going to continue to play this way the rest of the year.
At least this year, yeah.
Like this is one of those where if I lose this deal because Kupp falls back to the pack, what do I actually lose? Sure, that 24 first is I'd rather not spend it if I don't have to, but if this is all I have to pay, like I think the other thing we probably forget about someone like Cooper Kupp is he probably has another 3 or 4 years, even if they're frustrating years. Like you're going to get your value back on this, and you may win your league. So I think this is how. And if that's a 23 and a 24 first, then I'm on the other side. I'm okay taking that, but at this price,
okay.
I'm okay.
The time gap.
Picks. Yep.
Mike, I'll let you go, and then I'll say something, and we'll go to the next one.
All right, so my breakdown too, like Scott said, if this was 23 and 24, like I'm looking at it going like, fuck yeah, I'd tear down to Rondale Moore. You give me 2 firsts and 2 classes that I really like. Because it's 24 and 25, I go, man, it's so far out. In a lineup league, I want the Cooper Kupp. But don't get it twisted, man. If this was a best ball league, even though it's 24 and 25, and everything you just said about WARP with Cooper Kupp, I'm taking Rondale Moore in the 2 picks. Now, I don't know exactly what a 25 first will buy me as a contender in a best ball league, but I'm willing to go find out. I'm willing to go see where somebody goes like, you know what? I will take a 25 first for that guy. And I think if you were to put player names in there on potentially what you could buy in a best ball league, and we did the whole calculation about spike weeks and consistent weeks and how many times these guys are going to make your lineup, the whole works, you're going to find out that Rondale Moore and those 2 players, which you could plug into 24 and 25, would actually be more beneficial for you throughout the entire season. But in a lineup league, because it's 24 and 25, give me Cooper Kupp. I'll take the WARP advantage over it.
I'll say this. To your point too, about the best ball thing, not even just the best ball thing, lineup in general. What you're also doing, Mike, if you put those 24 and 25 into players, is your injury de-risking. Because we just saw Cooper Kupp have a sprained ankle, but if that would have been worse, you are fucked, right? Like that just totally kills you. I'll say this. I think I'm agreeing. I'm gonna agree with both of you here that if you're contending, man, because he's so damn good and his volume is so ridiculous, like. This probably is a move that's going to go secure you a title, and that's what you're going to do because you want to win the money. Let me say this, though, to Scott's point where he started, right? What did we say? Cooper Kupp is an asset which is so fascinating in Dynasty because he's smashing so hard, but his cliff is coming, right? Now, let me say this. I'm going to give you a very good case for the other side if I'm rebuilding is this. Cooper Kupp is a asset that is going to cliff. We know it's coming. if this is an older team that looks like it may win, or even if it wins or doesn't win, you don't care because these are 24 and 25 picks. Imagine if this team is really old built and doesn't have a lot of depth, and you pick up a 24 and a 25 first. Rondell Moore you could almost forget about. Like, you could be looking at early 24 and then early 25, and for you got to get off of Cooper Kupp in a rebuild. Like, I could really make the case for the other side, but I do think that from a warp perspective, if you're able to do this on the contender, you got to do it. So I guess that's the way I would look at it. I don't know if you guys had any disagreements or thoughts other than that on that.
I think if you're in a spot where you can sell a Cooper Kupp or a Travis Kelce or someone like that, that is the type of situation you target to trade him to.
Mm-hmm.
You try to actually target the team that's toiling in the
yes.
They're good. They think this guy's going to be the piece that unlocks their championship. But you also look at their roster and you go, man, I am willing to bet against this team in 18 months.
Yes.
And I may be sitting on, this may end up being the 103 and the 102 in these two classes. You're going to have to wait. You're going to have to be patient. People are going to bitch at you going, why are you trading Travis Kelce? Or
yes.
Cooper Kupp and Travis Kelce are the two warp guys that the cliff is coming. If you have them in leagues, you've already looked within yourself and you go, I'm just going to ride it out and take the 0 if I haven't moved them yet. But you also know, like, there are certain teams where you can plant that landmine on their roster. Mm-hmm. And we know the managers in some of our leagues too. It's like they'd do anything to get Travis Kelce, but I'm also knowing that manager's history. Like, there's a pretty good shot that if this doesn't go their way, I'm sitting on gold mine picks in a year from now. So I think that's a great example. Like, if he identifies that's the type of manager and he goes, man, I just planted his 2 firsts.
Yes, man.
After this year. And this, I'll tell you this, the guy who traded the 2 firsts, I'm guessing he also already traded his 23 first, just by the fact that he's going out to 24 and 25.
Exactly.
Like, this may be everything he's got left in the chamber. And if Kupp goes down, that's almost got like an orphan written on it. You know what I mean?
That's exactly what I'm getting at is everything Scott just said. And I think sometimes too that is a heady move that I think is underappreciated in the moment. And to Scott's point too, is going to get people pissed off. And it's like, there's no collusion here. This is a savvy move that is going to just take time for it to pan out. So interesting one there. So we got draw 4 here. We have a 12-team start 9, and this is a rebuild. He's acquiring Kyle Pitts for Robert Tonyan and a 23 first. There was no specification on where that first lands. Scott, I'll start with you, and then Mike will go to you. This is a start 9. This is a rebuild.
So assuming that this is not, it's not his own pick because the team names are different. So
it is not, right?
Yeah, assuming it's not. What I don't like sometimes is people will come to me and they go, I'm tanking. I'm going to have the 101 or the 102. Should I trade it away for Kyle Pitts? And even if it's like the best asset in the league, right? Mm-hmm. Just generally, I'm like, no, you've already positioned your pick. Don't give it up now. A deal like this is going to be there at another time. It may not be Kyle Pitts, but it's going to be someone else, especially if you're sitting there going, yeah, I have the 102 next year, guaranteed. Don't trade that away for, DK Metcalf in a second or something like that. So, yeah. If this is like a tanking pick and it's his own pick and it's already positioned to be like top 2 or 3, I'm okay not doing this. With what I know right here, I'm okay taking the shot on the positional advantage in a start 9. So I'll actually lean the Pitts side. Yeah. It's a big move, but you can sell yourself. If you hit, mm-hmm. you've paid yourself back in spades because you've locked in a positional advantage, and that's huge.
Mike?
Unless this is like a top 3, top 4 pick in 23, like I want the Kyle Pitts side.
Yep.
Lineup, best ball. I don't give a shit. I'm willing to put my chips down on Kyle Pitts. Right? We just recorded 40 right before it, and Kyle Pitts was one of those guys on there. So, spoiler alert, we talked about it a little bit. Like, I'm willing to still bet and gamble on Kyle Pitts just because of the talent. And, like, this may be too much player-centric about it, but I like Kyle Pitts more. I'm with Scott, though. Like, if I did all this work to get the 101, the 102, the 103, like, I'm not doing it now. Like, This deal will be available later if I want to do it. And the good thing about it, that 101, that 102, that 103, it doesn't get hurt, right? It can't tear an ACL. It can't blow an Achilles. It can't get arrested and suspended from the league. Like, it's fine. I'm good. But anything later than that, like, if all it cost me is, like, Bob Tunyon and, like, the 108, a 109, like some playoff team's first round pick to go to Kyle Pitts, that's where my comfort level goes. Like, fuck yeah, I'll pull the trigger right now. Give me Kyle Pitts, and I'll move on with my life.
Yeah, I think this is pretty simple. If it's a early top 3 pick, the thing about it is, right, you can get this deal later. And the other thing, if it was a top 3 pick, top 2 pick, Kyle Pitts, we kind of are already seeing, like, even though he's a incredibly important asset, he's not likely to get a value bump. He's already lost value. This team's not going to be passing the ball a lot. Like, this is not something that's going to go great for Kyle Pitts the rest of the year, where he's going to get this value bump. In the offseason, you can make the move. If it's late, however, and I will say the setting for me matters a little bit here, because when it's start 9, when we talk about warp advantages, right, you talk about how important Travis Kelce is. Now, you know Kyle Pitts isn't giving you that warp advantage today, but the reason you're getting Kyle Pitts is because he's going to give you a positional advantage in a very shallow position, and in start 9, that matters a ton. So if I'm sending a later 23 first and Bob Tonyan for Kyle Pitts, this one is easy if it's late, or even like 107 or later for me. But to Scott's point and Mike's point, we all agree, if this is a early 23 first, this was not the right time to do the move. So
let me ask you guys this: if this is a mid first, and instead of Bob Tonyan, you're having to send back like a Pat Fryermuth, in best ball, are you taking the Fryermuth in the first side?
Yeah, I think I am.
Best ball, I would. Yep.
Yeah.
So best ball, even if it's like a 107, 108, and you're not getting Robert Tonyan, but you're getting a clear tier down from Pitts, but it's it's Fryermuth, it's somebody like that, where like best ball, you'd switch sides, right? Because of that just process, right?
100%.
Okay.
That's a great call, and I think the reason there, Scott, especially, is because I can then move that first at the proper time for an asset right now. And I think there's a real chance that Pat Fryermuth and Kyle Pitts are very similar in spike weeks and consistency weeks. And then I have a 23 first. One, it's still liquidity, even in best ball. Like, if my team's not great, I still have a young asset in Fryermuth, and I still have a pick that could be good. So it's just, I want the double side there, which is crazy to say because I was so fucking high on Kyle Pitts. But yeah, you're 100% right, man. On the process side, yes, if that was best ball, I want that other side. We got a 3-way here, gentlemen, and this is the other thing about it. This is an 8-0 team. This is an AAF league, so real quick, switch your minds to one quarterback.
Shit.
And this guy's 8-0. Three-way trade. He's the defending champ, our boy Ignited here. So he's receiving DeAndre Hopkins and Kyler Murray. This is one quarterback. He's sending away Trey Lance, a 23 first, and 3/3. Apparently one is mid. Oh, because the other ones are his. So one's mid. The other person's receiving Trey Lance, Romeo Dubs, a 23 third, and sending away Kyler Murray for a late 23 second. The other person is receiving a 23 first, a 23 second, 2/3, and sending away Nuke and Dubs. So being that it's lineup, it's a lot to go on here, but I know our man Scott can handle it. Scott, you want to kind of talk through the 3 pieces here?
Yeah, these 3-way trades on Sleeper are they warp with my mind sometimes, but I look at the sides and I go, I can see why Ignited took the Hopkins Murray stack. I don't play 1 QB, but I have become more fascinated with, like, JJ Zacharyason's talked about this a lot this year, on how we've probably actually undervalued the high-end quarterbacks in 1 QB. Like, if you come to somebody and go, is it worth 2 years ago, if you would have asked me, is it worth paying, 2 or 3 firsts for Josh Allen in a 1 QB, I would have been like, dude, you're insane. But then you line up the data and you're like, yeah, he's probably worth at least 2 firsts. You know what I mean? He's probably worth paying up for if that's your big move. So I get what he's doing. He's basically getting bailed out of Lance and getting a quarterback that fills the same placeholder but's better.
Right.
It's not going to lose much value. So I see no issue with that part. And then he's paying up for Hopkins. I mean, he's paying a 23 first for Hopkins. So that's a little bit of an overpay, but I get it. He's going for the stack, the extra benefit of the stack.
Yep.
I can see why he does it. And then the bottom side, I mean, he's basically liquidating Romeo Dubs and Hopkins and getting a bunch of picks. So I like that side. I think there's always one loser in these 3-way trades. It's probably the team in the middle. I'm like, what?
Yes.
He's getting Lance for Murray, but he's essentially getting Dubs in a third for a second. And it's kind of like, I don't really see where he really helped himself on either side. So I think that's how I break it down. Team 1 and Team 3 benefit here most likely, and Team 2 is just the guy they use to get there on both sides.
Nail on the head, right? The Mike Ev side is like, show me where I need to sign up because I want to make this happen. I want to liquidate Nuke and Dubs. I don't understand. The only case, like I'm literally just trying my best to figure out how there would be a way where Corey 2183 is saying I want to do this. Is it like if somehow Murray being off his team is helping him get closer to an early pick? I don't understand how in the world you'd want to do this. You're taking the risk of Lance. You're losing a top 10 rushing quarterback, right? You're getting one that's hurt that's supposed to be a rushing quarterback. And I don't think Dubs is worth the second, even if you told me the third's not coming my way, because seconds in a late second in one quarterback, guys, we know is basically a third-round pick. Like, this is – Corey got abused. And
Dubs
I like
might be adding points to his roster, so it defeats the idea of getting Murray off for Lance. So
great point, too. I didn't even think about that. It totally negates the argument that could even exist. Mike, any disagreements?
So I gotta give a shout out to, Scott. You got me into Warp. Dynasty Barry then started posting all kinds of stuff about Warp, and I got really interested. And one of the cool things about us having our own Patreon and like having really smart people surrounding us all the time is our guy Koopa Trooper, who had a trade featured on here. He started putting out Warp charts, and that's what we did the last 40 episode on. So he started doing Warp charts on one QB. And to your point, Scott, like the elite quarterbacks, the super elite quarterbacks, the Josh Allens, like those are massive Warp advantages. Like those are guys, to your point, where it's like, yeah, you should be trading 2 first-round picks for them. The problem I have is when you get into guys like the range of Kyler Murray, where it's like it's the name value, and I don't think it really matches up. So if I look at it like Hopkins and Murray for Lance, like I get it, man. You want to get off Lance if you're a contender. It's just like the rest of it just feels like too much to send away. It just really does to buy DeAndre Hopkins, even in a 1 QB league. Like the Kyler Murray thing, he's in this weird spot, and this is where I'm listening to your podcast when you're breaking down all the stuff about the quarterbacks and their actual efficiency. And it's like, dude, he's just propped up by attempts. Like if this ever changes, what the fuck is he? And I don't want to pay for that. I don't want to pay for the what the fuck in 1 QB. I really don't. Like, if I'm going to pay up for quarterback, it better be Josh Allen. It better be Patrick Mahomes to some extent, Justin Herbert, or it better be one of these guys. And Kyler Murray doesn't even make the Warp list. Like, it goes down to 50. You can't find him. And if you can't find him in 50 players, all right. Like, I'm good with just whoever the fuck I put in there. So, Corey obviously got screwed. I don't like the deal for anybody. I think it's horrible for everybody.
You don't like Mike Evside getting off a Nuke and Dubs for the first?
Good for him, but it's still like this is where I don't play in 1 QB. I think about if I take 3 quarterbacks out of the mock drafts we're doing. Yes, I kind of like the early second round guys, but everybody moves up, and it's like, what the fuck are some of these like late first round picks in 1 QB league? Like, these dudes, are these just Rashad Whites? Like, like we did a trade earlier. Like, okay. All right, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, but in the same breath, though, because I agree with you that the first are going to be devalued, but at the same time, then that also applies to Ignated's side. That 23 first, if he's 8-0 and he wins, you're talking about really a second round value pick. I'll say this: I get where you're coming from with Kyler, but I also don't know his roster, and he's telling us he's 8-0. So even if you're acknowledging, even if you want to say this is an overpay for Kyler. Like, what if he's going from Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, fucking obliterated territory because in one quarterback you're not going to roster. It's not smart to roster a bunch of backup quarterbacks. So when Trey Lance goes down, you may have a quarterback that's actually not helping you win, but you're still 8-0. And if you can go to Kyler, that's much different than whoever the fuck your shitters are rostering out. I guess that's where I can see it.
Good chance that Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts are on the 2 teams he's probably trying to fucking beat too.
Exactly.
So like he might have gone. We're probably sitting there going, man, you're going to throw all these picks out for a quarterback. You better have gotten strike. You must better have struck out on all the other ones. But I'm also guessing, the Jalen Hurts team is 7-1, and the Josh Allen team's also 8-0, and you can't pay them enough to get those guys off their team. So maybe this was the best he could do, and he feels this is the this is the piece. He's betting on the Kyler Hopkins stack, giving him another month's worth of production. And, I get it. This is an all-in move that if it doesn't work out, he's going to be left holding the bag, but we don't know the context.
I think I agree. I do agree with everything that we've all said. Like, I still see Mike's side and why it's a little bit of an overpay if you're not sure that Kyler's really giving you warp advantage, but I think there's a lot more to it potentially than we know. We got our boy 7 Goat Rings here, man. We wouldn't be doing a trade show, Mike, if we didn't have 7 Goat Rings in the building. So, Mike, go ahead and tell us what 7 Goat Rings did here, buddy.
Kirk Singletary in a first. He sent away Eno, Chuba, a first, and in 23 second. Now, this is one of those, is this one of those disrespecting trades where you just swap first? You just know? Like, hey, I know your first is worse than mine.
Oh, you know what? Here, I forgot to give context. 7 Goat Rings, 10 team, Superflex, start 10. Currently with rankings, the 106 versus the 109. So 7 Goat Rings pick is looking like the 109 as of today, and Black Scoobies is the 106.
Oh, my God. Why? Black Scooby, you've been on the show before, buddy.
Not in a good way.
You would have think after Goat Rings just does this to him week in and week out, he just stopped trading with him, but must love him, man. Like, I want Kirk over Eno, no question about it. Mm-hmm. I'm not a Devin Singletary fan, but I want him over Chuba. And then, of course, if I'm getting the 106 over the 109, I will take that. And I think all that adds up to, the 209, the second that he's sending? I'm good. Best ball lineup, league setting, size, I don't care. Give me the Kirk Singletary and the 106 side. Why'd you do this?
Where are you at, Scott? You have any different feelings, or you feel the same way?
I feel the same way with Mike on the players. I think he got the player for player. He got 2 player upgrades. And I think in a 10-team start 10, you do the math, that's the equivalent of a 12-team start 8.
Right.
So he essentially paid a roster clogger 209 to move up 3 spots in the rookie draft, which is, that's one of those moves where, sure, you may lose out by missing on a player you wanted at 209, but it's a 10-team start 10. Mm-hmm. That's extremely shallow. So he probably looked at this and I'm guessing he probably has, because I've seen his trades on here before, I'm guessing he probably has a pretty good roster, and he's probably man, I'm going to have way too many good players. I'm probably going to be up against having to cut players just to make these picks. So he essentially paid to get an upgrade in the rookie draft 3 spots, which could be the difference between finding a starter and just a good player. So, yeah, he won this trade on all I think I see why you guys are questioning it, because he literally won the trade on all 3 aspects. I'm trying to find where the other side thought he was winning this, and I just don't see it.
Let me give it to you this way. If it's somebody that's thinking, Kirk's not played well lately, he could have better receivers, he needs running back, he doesn't see it today as much of a difference between 106 and 109. I'll say this, too. What's very interesting, I think the 4D chess move here that he made, and this is the 4D chess Dynasty Trade Show, we need to discuss this. Current 106 means what? Barely making the playoffs right now.
Yeah.
What does that really mean? This team could be fucking teetering. And if this team does not make the playoffs, and if somehow that's 103, 104, you're talking about, I think, reality with him getting this trade, him being the current 109. That also doesn't mean anything. That could be 1 win away from the 112. He very well could have traded him the last pick in the draft if he wins this league for a team that's in the fucking top 6 early part of the draft. I don't know if there's a lottery involved. I think 4D chess this is crazy, man. I can't believe that for this level of players, you were able to convince the guy that we should do a pick swap. That was the piece here. All the other shit I honestly think is noise, even though I agree that the better players are going to him. I think the pick swap is the absolute crown jewel of this. And I think if it breaks right, it could be massively different from the 103, 104 to the 112. So
good Lord.
That's
all the players are probably outside startable range anyway.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Exactly.
You nailed it. This is probably, let's go to the top end of both of our benches and let me get a pick upgrade. And he's probably hoping that the other guy tries to put Eno Benjamin and Chuba Hubbard in his lineup because he goes, that's not scaring me for you making the playoffs, you know?
Exactly. Like this is, man, exactly that. Summarized exactly like that. Last deal of the day here. We did a long one, Scott. We don't want to keep him too much longer. We've already been going for a while, but we got him here, so we wanted to do a bunch of trades. This is a new member. We try to feature our new members anytime we can. New member, Blitzing Buzzard, 12-team Superflex lineup league. So he is trading away, Kyler. Speaking of Mike and the Kyler discussion we had with the one quarterback, right? We got Kyler Murray being traded away for a 23 first, a 24 first, and another 23 first. So obviously getting the second and the third here. The third looks like he's getting his own third back. Lineup here, I'm going to start with Scott, and then obviously I can tell by Mike's facial expression we're going to get a nice send-off for our new member here.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a fair deal. If you're shipping off Kyler, this is a great price to get for him. I also think – so let me just say that. I would take the pick side slightly because I think you're getting a decent haul for Kyler. The only drawback would be if you're willing to bet on Kyler in a lineup league, there is, I think, an advantage out there of when one of these potential difference-making quarterbacks becomes available, you pounce. Even if it's the market price, you may not. The person that bought Kyler is probably not sitting here thinking he got a discount necessarily. The discount is that someone actually put like a top 8 quarterback on the block. A lot of times,
and didn't get any quarterback back at all.
Exactly, he basically did it for picks. A lot of the quarterbacks in that range are just simply unattainable unless you're willing to break up probably your roster construction. I've tried to go and upgrade at quarterback by giving 2 firsts and a quarterback. The issue I've run into is the team I'm trading the players or the picks to, they see the Derek Carr that I'm trying to give them, and they go, that guy's worthless. And I'm sitting there going, like, he's probably more valuable to me. But as soon as I can't tack on 2 firsts to go get, Lamar Jackson, then I'm going to back off and go, I'll just have to roll with Derek Carr and find another way. So that's the thing. Is like a lot of times you can't add a shitty quarterback in a trade and just add 2 firsts to get one of the elite guys. So maybe that's how he was viewing it. Like, this is his shot to get the elite quarterback. Maybe he has a really crappy quarterback room. He's been saving up these assets, and this is his one shot to get like a top 7 or 8 quarterback. Because I'm in leagues where they just don't move. They don't move. There's 2 or 3 teams that have 2 of the elite ones, and they're never breaking it up.
Man, you know what's interesting? I'll go next because that's funny because I don't play in Scott, I play in more best ball than I do lineup now, right? And a lot of the lineups that I play in, I tend to like the bigger roster sizes or the starter sizes, I should say, because I only play in like maybe a handful, 2 or 3 that are like start 10 or lower. Now, this doesn't actually say that it's start 10, but if I'm thinking from the lineup mindset in the small starting roster spots, that's what I ran into in one league where you would have looked at my team, Scott, before the season, and you would have said this team is absolutely unreal loaded. Like, in all the skill spots, it's ridiculous. I got everybody. I got Kelsey and Pitts. I got running backs, receivers. I got it all. But what I had was Dak Prescott and Matthew Stafford, Scott. So what happened is I had been playing over this quarterback value over and over and over to get to that studded team, but I was not able to get a backup quarterback early, right? And I was like, all right, I'll just figure out the way in the season, and then Stafford sucks and Dak gets hurt, right? And then all of a sudden now I'm 3-5 and trying to get back in the playoffs. So, like, I understand that point of how the quarterbacks are tough to move, especially the top 10 ones like this guy. Let me say this, though. The one piece I think that's not added to the puzzle that I think really makes the blitzing buzzard side win it for me is this. He's getting a 23 first back in Pappy Yessie. He's getting a 23 first back in Ramsey's 25, who's probably going for it with Kyler here, so you're assuming that's late. The 24 first of his, and then he's getting his third back. What I think is not being added to this is he could probably be sitting on a top 3 pick of his own if he's done it correctly, which now I can replace Kyler with my pick of quarterback and still have all this slew to make up for the fact that I lost Kyler. I think that is the piece to the puzzle that makes me want to take the blitzing buzzer side. Mike, anything else?
I'm taking the blitzing buzzer side no matter what the format is, to be honest.
What if you didn't have your own pick and start 9?
If I didn't have my own pick in start 9.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still gonna take the value, man.
Okay.
The way I'm looking at it, I'm not the biggest Kyler fan, right? And part of this is your doing, Scott. Like the more and more you dive into it, I'm like, fuck, man. Like, all right, like he's got to be valued in this range just because the quarterback landscape is just kind of gross. But I really don't want to do it. So you're gonna give me 3 firsts, a second, and a third for Kyler. By all means, man, you can have him because the way I'm looking at it, I'm going, what's the market on the guy who owns Justin Fields right now? Like, would a first and a second get it done? Maybe. And he's starting to come on. And that's a guy I'm willing to place my chips on. A guy like Tua, right? Adam, we talked about him a little bit ago. What's the value on Tua right now? Like, so if I spend 2 firsts on Tua, like a guy I really like at the quarterback, like I go see what that guy has. So maybe I walk away and I get a Tua with 2 of these first. And then I just pocket a first, a second, and a third for Kyler. Like, that's the kind of tear down I want to make. And then you bring in the other point. If I'm already sitting on a good pick, maybe it's the 104 right now. I'm trading away Kyler. Maybe that moves up to the 102 or the 103. I'm going to add like a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud next year. Like, so now I'm going to walk away with a Tua, a CJ Stroud, and an extra first and an extra second. Like, all this value at some point, like, I just can't lose. I just can't lose if I do it. I will give you this, Scott, though. Like, for me, if I'm looking at it and I'm going, like, if this is Patrick Mahomes, if this is Josh Allen, if this is like Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, like one of these guys, Joe Burrow, I have a little bit more hesitation where it's like, yes, I want one of these guys. But if it falls into one of these categories where I think they're overvalued and people are propping them up a little bit too much because of the name, like, I'm good, man. You want to take that risk? You want to take all of Kyler on? I will just take the draft picks and I'll see what I can do with them. Whether that's me actually making these picks or making my own pick better, or exploring the other members of my league and seeing like, hey, what do you think of Tua? Like, I'm gonna try to go after guys that I like, and then see what else I can just pocket on top of it. Like, hey, this guy gave me 3 firsts and a second and a third for him. If it cost me 2 firsts to go to Tua, great. Like, this is what I have left over. If it cost me a first and a second to go and try to buy into a Justin Fields and place my bet on him, I'm still left with these other picks. So this is the kind of tear down where there's not a quarterback coming back, so it doesn't look like a traditional tear down, that I'm highly interested in doing because I'm thinking about what else I can do with the draft capital.
Yeah, I think I think by and large we're actually all kind of in agreement here, but I do think, like, I will say, all that being said, and me wanting the blitzing buzzard side in a start 9, start 10 league, and it's a lineup league, you need to know your leagues and the way it works, your league mates and the settings and stuff, because to Scott's point, I'm in leagues the same way he's just alluded to, where even if you win this trade, see Mike, here's the difference where I agree with your point, but like where Scott's point could constantly still be an issue is, like, if somehow you're not able to land Stroud or Bryce Young, right? Like, if you're not positioned to do that, all these picks are phenomenal. They're still good, but Mike, I'm in a league in a start 9 where Tua is not. I'm telling you right now, this guy, the guy will decline instantly 2 firsts for Tua, right? Like, to Scott's point, if you know that you're in a league where quarterbacks ain't moving, okay, you probably got off on Kyler on a win here, but where do you get back an elite quarterback or a top 15 quarterback? Because if people aren't trading quarterbacks, they think, like, I need these pieces because they're so valuable. That's where, even if you win the value, how do you get it back into the quarterback spot? Because in start 9, you have 2 quarterbacks that really matter versus the other 7 spots. So I'll say I understand why you might do this, even if it seems like a crazy overpay for Kyler Murray if you're having a hard time getting quarterback. But everything we discussed, man, I think even with all that being said, I still am willing to risk it with all these picks. So I don't know if anyone has anything else to say before we finish up the last trade here, Scott.
I think that, to your point, I kind of agree with Mike too on this is a Kyler evaluation more than it's a trade process evaluation. I would rather. So here's what I would say from the Ramsey side. Did he go and offer that same trade to every quarterback he has above Kyler? And if they all turned him down, okay. And then also, if he knows the context with the league, did he throw another player or first into the trade to get Mahomes or Josh Allen? I'd rather pay the extra first to get Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes in this case than settle for Kyler. And I'm curious if Mike feels the same way. I know he likes the value, but if you told me you had an extra 24 first in there, but you're getting Josh Allen, you'd probably even rather have that trade than this one, right?
Yeah, I think that's a much bigger upgrade, right? If I'm,
So,
you guys have converted me. You and Dynasty Barry and Eric have converted me to this warp thing. And when I'm looking at warp charts, I'm going like, what's the difference between me having a Kyler Murray and just having a placeholder? Like if this was a contender side for blitzing buzzer, like what's the difference between Kyler Murray and a fucking Daniel Jones or Jimmy Garoppolo? Like not that much. But what's the difference if I throw another first at him and I jump all the way up to a Josh Allen type? Like that is league winning type stuff right there that I'm willing to do just to get that advantage. Where Kyler Murray is just kind of in that weird zone where I just feel like you're paying too much for the name and you're paying too much for the guy who's like, this is a top 8 quarterback. Well, great. He doesn't provide the same positional advantage as some of the other guys that he's lumped in. Like the difference between him and these bottom tier guys, like the cost of those guys is absolutely nothing. And the cost of the elite guys, like I'm willing to pay for it because I feel like if I got to pay for this dude, I might as well just go and get Gucci.
Well, right? that's such a good point too, because the other thing too is like he did get paid, right? But Cliff Kingsbury is not certain there. We know that they drafted him at 1 because Kingsbury was calling the shot, right? If he's gone, like not only are you not getting the warp advantage and you're betting on this small frame quarterback that has rushing upside, right? But has had injury issues constantly, but doesn't have the long-term like elite certainty as well in Dynasty that does Josh Allen, that does Patrick Mahomes, that does Justin Herbert, right? Like Kyler Murray, we can say whatever you want about the evaluation, how you feel. Even if you're bullish on him, like, are you sure he's going to be considered in the elite conversation long term? I don't know that that's the case with him. I think that's where a big difference is for me. Not just the warp, which is definitely right, Mike, but if you're paying, you're paying your mortgage in future. We're talking about, right? 3 first, 4 first. You're mortgaging a lot on this. I'd rather have knowing that Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes are elite assets for a long time. So I think that's another big part of it too.
I feel you, buddy, man. Good trade to end it with.
Yeah, that was listen, man, that was a good one. Listen, Buzzer, we appreciate you coming in to the Discord and joining the shithead trades. And Mike, I think that was a good trade show, man. We did a bunch of trades. Scott, we really appreciate you coming on, man. A lot of good conversation in these trades, and also thinking about all the settings and what managers are doing. I love talking this stuff out. So, Scott, we appreciate you coming on. If you have anything else you wanted to plug or say before we get up out of here, man.
No, I appreciate you guys having me. It was a blast. I think even if you ignore the player names in these trades and you ignore like the context of the teams, because obviously people care a lot more about their teams than, some random trades on a podcast.
Right.
It's the thought process. Even if I'm wrong or Mike's wrong or Adam's wrong, it's the thought process of looking at this not just from player A for player B, but some of the intrinsic things that go into these trades. Like you might not see it on the surface, but I think we uncovered some things where, man, I never really thought about that. But when I really think about where that hidden value is, you look at trading a lot differently. And so I think that's what you take away. So this was a great show. It was really fun. Not just on Trades in 5, we literally do 100 of these trades like in an hour and a half. But there's so many times, because I like to talk, where I leave, they're kind of like, yeah, we got to move on. We can't spend 5-10 minutes on one trade.
I've seen it in your mind. I can see your mind doing that, but you can't do it. I've seen
There's so much context that people can learn once they get to that next level where they're not just looking for like rapid fire, like I want to see as many trades as possible. It's really like the thinking part of it that I enjoy. So this was a fun show, guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man.
I love having you on. I love chopping it up with you. I don't say it lightly, but you are one of the best minds in the Dynasty space. And ever since I found you way back on Mason Dodd's thing, just like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, just been enthralled with your mind and the way it works. And Adam knows, like, I'm interjecting you, like, hey, Scott said this, like in all our shit. And sometimes you can just see the eye roll, but there are still things that you and I disagree about, but this is what makes it so fun. And this is why I love chopping it up with you, because there's not a time where we talk or have a conversation where I don't go, you know what? Scott might be right on this. Shit, he might, and I need to change my opinion, or at least makes me think and come up with a good, valid argument on why I'm on the other side. And sometimes I ain't gonna lie, like I find out I'm full of shit, and that is the whole thing of Dynasty, where it's like trying to get better every single day, trying to put the best thought process into these trades, and exactly what you said. These won't be the same trades across your leagues, right? League settings differ, your entire league dynamics differ. But if you can talk through these deals and figure out what the thought process going into them is, you can make better deals as a dynasty manager going forward, going like, I heard them talk about this guy, and this guy's kind of similar to this guy. So this thought process should apply to it, and let me think through it. So, Scott, thank you so much for being on, man. I love chopping it up with you. It's been a great time. I have to piss like a racehorse, so
yeah.
I think I've been holding it since like deal 4.
Hey, we're going to get up out of here. I think the last quick thing I want to say is the whole thing, if you're watching this and your trades weren't on here, the process, the thought process, the players, the picks, league different settings, how they could apply to you, that's the whole thing we're trying to provide. It's not just simple, but we are trying to grade everybody's trade that's in the Discord and show what we think about their trades and also give the process in that way. I'll say this too. We had Blitzing Buzzard, last trade of the day. New member for the Patreon. Patreon.com/South Harmon. $1 gets you in the door. If you want to come flex that, Mike is telling you just did the best thing in the world. You got rid of the shitty quarterback for 3 firsts and plus. Come do it. $1 a month gets you in the door. You can come be on our trade show. We might even have a guest like Scott on here. So we appreciate everybody tapping in. We will see you this time next week. We are out of here. Peace.